This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Well, welcome to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Leigh Dow. Leigh, thank you for taking us on your career journey.
Oh, I'm excited to do it.
Awesome. Well, before we find out what you're actually doing today, let's start at the very beginning. And can you tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
An astronaut.
Did you say an astronaut?
I did.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, when I was really young, I wanted to be an astronaut. I just was always fascinated by space.
What started that? Did you watch, the space shuttle take off one day, or was it just something you always wanted to do?
If I remember correctly, when I was really little, my parents were very academic, and they emphasized reading at a very, very early age. So, I could read before I went to kindergarten. And I remember having a book that had a female astronaut, and I just thought that was the coolest thing.
You don't remember the name of that book, do you?
I don't. I could probably find it. It was a book my mom bought for me. She was always trying to encourage us to think of job opportunities that were in math and science, because she herself was in a job that was math and science related.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. Now, what was one of your first jobs you had as a young adult?
In high school, I had the typical work at the mall, retail kind of job. When I got to college, I first started working in a law firm as an assistant, and I really liked it. And then my roommate actually was working for the governor's office, and she told me about a job that was open in the PR and communications team for a student. So I went in and I applied for it, and I got the job. And so for the next 3 years, I worked in the governor's press and communications office.
Wow, that's a great job you have there at such a young age. Well, that leads us right into our next question. What do you do today? And if you would, kind of walk us how you got there.
Well, I own a marketing and PR agency, so I haven't strayed too far from where I started. But the path to get there is definitely not a traditional one. I actually was not studying PR or communications when I was working in the governor's office. I was studying political science and international affairs, and so those are what my undergraduate degrees are in, because I wanted to work in politics, and I was contemplating going to law school at the time. And I did apply and get into law school, and then changed my mind and decided not to go to law school. When I graduated, I actually went to work for a U.S. senator, and I loved that experience. It was amazing, especially at such a young age, to be exposed to how those decisions were made, what influences and impacts those decisions, and how people influence and impact how those decisions are made. And so I got really more interested in lobbying and legislative affairs, drafting legislation, doing the research for that. And in lobbying, they really teach you, job itself, but also your mentors around you, they really teach you how people are influenced. So they teach you, is a person influenced by data? Are they influenced by relationships? What are the things that are going to get that person to, come to your side, basically? And those are great skills to learn for any job, because you have to be able to lead with influence in any job. So it was definitely an education. I ended up leaving and going into a private law firm to lobby with them. I lobbied mostly Immigration, Department of State, and Department of Labor issues, all of which are very intertwined. And Intel was one of our clients, and they ended up hiring me, and they moved me to California. So I worked for Intel, started in government affairs. Then I moved into PR and marketing. During that time, I went back to school and got my MBA in technology management. Worked for Intel for 7 years in a lot of different kinds of roles. What I really loved about working there is that they have the motto of own your own employment, which I think is great. It's such a great motto, because that means you own your employability. If you continue to expand your skills and develop new skills and want to be a continuous learner, then they're going to give you the opportunities to do that. And it's also a great way to have more job security if you're more diversified in your skill set, right? So when you see people get laid off, a lot of time it's people who have, one particular skill set and don't have that, well-roundedness. At the time, I don't know how they are now, but at the time, Intel did not want leaders who had come up through one particular job function unless it was really specialized. They wanted really well-rounded leaders who had worked in supply chain and manufacturing and marketing and finance, and had that, really well-rounded experience. So I worked for Intel for 7 years, and then I took my sabbatical, which they offered. I came back and I quit, and I went to work for Honeywell Aerospace, mostly because it was just a bigger role and a bigger opportunity in a different industry.
Was that still on the PR side, marketing side?
Yeah, I worked in the marketing and communications team. I was the lead for online marketing. And over time, that job got a lot bigger in scope, and I became the lead for e-commerce and online marketing. So the e-commerce channel for aerospace is about $1 billion worth of business for Honeywell. It was really a really important strategic initiative to them at the time. People always ask me, they're like, how did you go from computers to planes and defense and space? And I always tell people, well, at Intel, we made stuff that goes in a box that happens to be a computer. And at Honeywell, we make stuff that goes in a box that happens to fly.
It's a good way to define it for folks.
Yeah. So I really loved working in aerospace, got to work across the entire company instead of, just in general aviation or business aviation or just the space side. Because I ran e-commerce, I got to see all the different verticals and industries. So that was really very exciting for me because I like to have that kind of diversity in my job. I would think I wouldn't enjoy being, like a product manager of one product, especially at an aerospace company where products can have a 40-year life cycle.
Right.
So I worked there for 7 years and, progressively more expansive roles and leadership roles. My last 2 years, I actually worked for Honeywell Corporate outside of the aerospace organization, worked on a global team to set up service delivery areas around the world, and my job was to help design how that process was going to work, how we were going to communicate with people, and how we were going to be able to communicate with each other across the globe and deliver seamless service.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a very fun job. It was a brand new group. My team was all across the world. Our phone calls would sometimes be at 4 a.m. or sometimes they would be at 11 p.m.
Right.
But I did get to travel a lot in my roles at Intel and Honeywell, and for me that was probably the most exciting part of those jobs. I got to go to so many places I probably would not have spent my own money to go to.
Right.
But it really changed my worldview and just exposed me to so many interesting cultures and people.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great part of jobs if you're able to have that experience and exposure, like you said, especially the different ways the businesses operate in those different countries. That had to be quite eye-opening.
Definitely. The culture in, just as an example, we had a project with a team in Malaysia, and we would do video conferences with them, and we would meet with them, and we would say, okay, here's what we think needs to happen, and they would say yes, and they would nod their head, and a week or two would go by, and we'd have another conference, video conference, and we would ask them what had happened, and, if any progress had happened, and they would say no, and we would say why, and they would say, well, we didn't say we were going to do it, we just said, they just said, we heard you. So when they nod, it just means I heard you. It doesn't mean yes. So things like that you just learn in different cultures that I think make your job even more interesting. And so I worked there for 7 years, and then I left and I went to work for a very small supplier of Honeywell that gave me the opportunity to run the world's biggest online IT community of of a few million people. And so I wanted to do that because community management was very hot at the time. It was an element of communications that I hadn't done a lot of. I wanted to learn more about. But I knew when I took that job that they were trying to build the company up to divest it. And so I knew that I could be out of the job within a year. When I took that job, the VP of communications of Honeywell, who originally hired me 7 years prior, he called me out of the blue and he said that he was, now that he had retired, he was, just working through the people he wanted to stay in touch with. And he said, I'd love to take you to lunch and hear about what you're doing. I said, okay. So we went to lunch, and the first thing he asked me was, he said, what sparked my interest is that you left Honeywell, and I saw that you went to this company. What are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said that he always thought that I would have gone out on my own, started my own thing, my own agency, and he was just really surprised that when I left, that's how I left instead of going off and doing my own thing. And I asked him, I said, well, why didn't you ever tell me that? No, you've never told me that. And he said, well, why would I tell you that? When I was there, you would leave.
That's right.
I said, okay, that makes sense. But the reason I left the job is that the last 2 years, my job was a job that I took knowing that it was only going to be a 2-year assignment. I knew that it had a start and an end. I was gone very frequently. I was gone, weeks at a time overseas. I had very young children at the time. And my family and I knew that, okay, for 2 years I can make that commitment. But at the end of that 2 years, they wanted me to continue doing that for another year, and that just wasn't acceptable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I left the company and went to the smaller company. And so, he sort of planted that seed with me, because I said to him, well, I know that I can do the work, but I don't know how to go get the work. I don't know if I can do that if I have an agency. And he said, oh, you'll learn. All right, well, that's a risky move, but okay.
Right.
So sure enough, they sold the company about 9 months after I started working there and laid off everyone. They just bought the technology and the platform. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do this, I had a good severance, and if I'm ever going to do this, now's a great time to try. So I started freelancing, and I really loved the freedom and flexibility that I had, and I liked the diversity of working on different industries, different products, different clients, instead of just one thing for one company. And so I did that for about 6 months, and at about the 6-month mark, I realized I was getting repeat business, and I was getting referrals. So I realized, hey, I need help. So that's when I started the agency.
Wow, that's a great career journey you had there, because you went a lot of different spots, and it seemed like every one of them you were learning more and building on your skill set and your experience. And the travel piece had to be pretty huge for you as well. And then it sounds like you built some pretty good relationships, and if an old boss was giving you some advice.
Yeah, well, I always tell people, they say, because I have a very extensive network, and it is something that I actually spend a lot of time cultivating. You also have to remember that I went to one of the biggest universities in the country. I worked for 2 of the biggest companies in the world. And so because of that, and the political thing too, because of that, I just do know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I've been able to do in agency life is step out of just working on, technology marketing and PR and working on sports marketing, which I love. I was fortunate enough to work with a company that's in Phoenix. They're headquartered in Phoenix, but they're all over the world, called Exos. I got to work with a lot of guys who are going through the NFL combine and draft process,
mm-hmm.
and working with them on, positioning them and, helping them tell their story through that process. Lots of different sports, and it was just a really amazing job, and I loved it. Sports marketing is very fun if you love sports.
So let me ask you this. What does your typical work week look like?
Crazy. Crazy, but I like it that way. One of the things that I've always really liked about public relations is a little bit different than other types of marketing, is that I divide public relations into 2 categories. One is news, the other is publicity. So in news, you pretty much know, unless it's something happening external to your world, you pretty much know what you have to plan for. Maybe it's a grand opening, maybe it is a product announcement, but you can plan for that. You can predict it. That's about 80% of a PR person's life. There's this 20% that is unpredictable and spontaneous, and I love that about public relations. I love that, every day, your day is completely different. What you're working on is usually different, especially if you're in an agency doing public relations. And the publicity side of it is really fun, because that's where you get to be creative. You get to come up with ideas of things that you can do that will generate news. You really do get to be, wear both hats of being analytical and creative. I think that one of the things that I've noticed in hiring people coming out of, whether it's somebody who is still in college and is an intern, we have quite a few from Arizona State University, is that the thing that is hard to find in today's world is great critical thinking skills. And you absolutely have to have that in pretty much any job, but definitely in public relations, because journalism students learn that. And so if you're working with journalists and reporters and you studied PR and communications instead of journalism, you're going to have to develop that critical thinking skill so that you can stay a step ahead of where their question is going to go when they're interviewing somebody, or where a story might go, or how to manage crisis communications. You absolutely have to have critical thinking skills, which I feel like I learned in my political science degree.
You gave me a lot right there. So is your typical week, you're basically hopping around from all these different projects in different stages? Would that be accurate?
It used to be. I have made a personal goal as CEO to, in the last couple of years, to stop working in the business and focus on working on the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so it used to be that, I was actively engaged and involved with every single, line item of a project for a client. That's not the case anymore. I have a great leadership team. I have someone who's my project manager, who has tremendous experience, 2 decades worth of managing projects for really complex industries. I have 2 people on my team that came from Honeywell that actually worked with me at Honeywell that also have decades of experience working, in that environment. And then my PR vice president is somebody who has a tremendous amount of news production, so she used to be a producer. So she knows the inside of a newsroom. She knows exactly how to get coverage and hook some reporter, to actually cover the story. So now that those elements are in place, I've really tried to focus on working on growing the business and managing the agency.
Right. Okay. No, that sounds great. As a reminder, you can check out all previous episodes at learnfromothers.org. And if you're a student or an educator, you can search for podcasts by career cluster, and additional resources are under the resource tab. So we learned what you wanted to be when you grew up, which was an astronaut, and what you actually do today, which is running your own PR firm. So if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Well, I was always a good student in school. I took honors classes and AP classes and things like that in high school, but I can't say I put a lot of effort into it, and I should have. I should have done that because I would have been much better prepared for college. I'm definitely not afraid of failure, but I can say my first semester of college was a disaster. I think it's mostly because I was definitely mature enough to be away from home and be at school, but I didn't have the study habits that I needed to keep up in college with the way that college is taught. So I definitely would have learned how to be a better studier. I would have learned how to take better notes, just those things that are very fundamental to being a great college student.
Right. No, that's a huge jump right there.
It was easy. I didn't have to work hard to get the B.
Yeah.
So I didn't work harder to get the A.
I was the same. I rarely studied. I struggled the same exact way you did. Wow, that's interesting.
I mean, I do have a 22-year-old who is in college, and I do have some pretty strong opinions about the pressure that I see kids under to basically be these superheroes in high school.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest was an exceptional student. She graduated with distinguished honors. She was in classes that I would have been terrible at. She's very good at math. I was not good at math. I really had to work for my math grades. She's always been exceptional at math and physical science. I've always asked her and her friends when, they seem to have these existential crises about, how do I push myself to take, that calc class in high school? I always ask them, I'm like, why? Because if you're not going to major in math or science in college, then why are you doing that to yourself? Because you can take that class in college. You don't have to do it now.
Right.
I just feel like there's all this pressure on kids, to have this incredible resume before they even leave high school. And I never felt that pressure. I had, good classes, and I was an athlete, and I, participated in other extracurricular activities. I had a job in high school, but I didn't feel pressure to have this incredible resume before I even graduated from high school.
Right, and actually that leads me right to my next question. Let's make the assumption someone wants to do what you do, to be a professional in PR, not necessarily have their own firm, but what advice would you give them? One piece of advice would be, don't overdo it in high school necessarily.
Well, I just think that public relations in particular, there's a few different kinds of public relations professionals. There are the people who work in an agency, and they tend to work more on facilitating PR for a client. There are people who work in what's called strategic communications, which is where I spend more of my time these days. Strategic communications is more where you're going to find people who work with a lobbying firm, or they put together crisis communications plans, or they manage crisis communications for clients. And then you have people who are publicists, people who are really trying to come up with creative ways to generate that buzz and get noticed. And those are really different skill sets. And so first would be to pick which one of those do you feel like is more in what's going to be good for you, and then go get those skills. If you're a publicist, you need to be assertive, you need to be creative, you need to be able to talk your way into any room or any club or anywhere.
Yep.
You need to be able to be very transparent, and you really need to almost become like best friends with your client. They need to know that they can trust you and that they can, work with you on anything. In strategic communications, that's much more critical thinking. It's a lot more analytical. It's a lot of thinking, what I call thinking around corners. And so being able to see things that aren't there yet. And so those skills are skills that you're going to learn in a class that requires you to do a lot of essay writing, a lot of scenario planning, things like that. And then there's the news side of PR, and that is more journalism. So studying journalism, how a newsroom works, how the news industry works in today's world, how social media comes into play. Those are all very important things to learn.
So they figure out which direction they want to go in. And is it pretty much you have to have some type of college degree to get into public relations?
No, I don't think so. I see less and less of that in entertainment, depending on who you're working for. We only hire college graduates. That's not necessarily because we're not okay with hiring someone who didn't go to college. I just haven't had that person presented to me.
Right.
I will say this, though, that this is going to sound strange from somebody who has an advanced degree, 2 undergraduate degrees. Everyone in my family has an advanced degree. But I actually don't know if I really believe in college. I certainly don't believe in college for everyone. I don't think college is for everyone. I think that kids today have been sold a lie that college is for everyone, and it's not. I can tell you lots and lots of companies that I work with tell me all the time that if they could find a kid who teaches himself Python, a woman who teaches herself how to code the languages that are hot today, they'd rather have that person than a college graduate.
Right.
So I think it really depends on ambition and drive. I think that a great employee who is consistent and willing to learn is sometimes more valuable than the person who has that degree.
Employers are looking for someone who can actually do the job, no matter where they came from that experience, I guess would be lack of a better way to put it. Like the coding piece, if they know how to do it, whether they went to a college to learn how to do it or they learned it on their own or they learned it another way, they just want someone that can do it well.
You see that less and less in my world, but definitely when I worked in technology, I saw specialization was more important than the degree. I think as our world becomes more technical and more specialized, and what I do is becoming more technical and specialized with the advancement of machine learning and artificial intelligence, that has completely changed the way a newsroom works, and it will change the way a newsroom works moving forward. Understanding that and being able to understand the technical components is not necessarily something you're going to learn in a communications degree in college.
Wow, that sounds fascinating, what you just said right there. I didn't realize it was going through such a transformation at this point.
Yes, so machine learning and artificial intelligence are now being used in newsrooms. They're being used to predict story trends, being used to predict traffic to a story, what stories are going to pop. It's being used to write stories and create them real time. So that's definitely going to change the way news is presented to us.
Wow, that's amazing. I could have a whole podcast just on that subject with you, I'm sure. Well, are there any current projects you're working on that you would like to share?
Sure. We've been working for quite some time, for about 2 years, with Pelican Products. They have a whole side of their business that is military and professional, but they also have a side of their business that is consumer-based, retail. So that's the kind of brand like a Yeti that you'll see in, REI or Cabela's, Bass Pro Shops. And we just finished wrapping up 2 of their biggest shows of the year that they go to work with retail buyers. And so we're working with them on positioning some new products that will be coming to stores near you quite soon, that are really fun and are great if you're into that outdoor lifestyle.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so they make a lot of products for hunting and camping and fishing. And so those industries are very fun to work in, and the products are, fun to have. One of the great parts about working in PR is you almost always get a lot of sample products.
Right. So you can go out test hunt with one of their products.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a Cabela's just down the street. I'll be sure to keep an eye out for it. So it's Pelican Products?
Pelican Products, they make, the heavy-duty coolers. They make tumblers, bottles, things like that. So then another project and this just will, I think, highlight the diversity of working in an agency and why it's really fun, is that, okay, so we have that outdoor lifestyle brand that we work with, but the last couple of weeks, I've actually been spending a lot of time working with a company that's based out of New York that is a risk management and cybersecurity company. They hired us to manage the crisis communications for their clients. So whenever there's a data breach, a security breach, a hacking attempt, or a hacking, I should say, a success, or anything that falls under that risk management umbrella of disaster recovery or data recovery, they need someone who understands strategic communications and can build those crisis communications plans for their clients, and their clients are some of the biggest companies in the world, and then how they do the risk mitigation after the fact, and we do the communication internal and external after something happens.
That is truly a 180 from two different projects you're working on.
Completely.
Wow. Well, that's really cool. Well, as with most journeys, success largely depends on reliable transportation. So I'm a huge car enthusiast. I don't know if you are or not, but what was your first car?
My first car was a Chevy Chevette.
You could tell people I had a Vet. It just was a Chevette, not a Corvette.
I know. And I coveted the Honda CRX my entire time in high school, and I finally got it when I graduated. So that was my college car, and I loved that car.
That's a fantastic car, the CRX. Well, cool. Well, what's your dream car if you have one?
A Bentley Coupe.
A what?
The Bentley Coupe.
The Bentley Coupe?
Yeah.
That is a gorgeous car. A friend of mine has one of those. Those are absolutely gorgeous. It's probably one of the prettiest cars out there in my mind.
I agree. It's very classic. It's very sophisticated. It's not loud or flashy, but it's just a beautiful machine.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, some companies offer a company car. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd love to buy you a cool company car based on your job. So I went with the public relations route, and I picked out a really cool one for you. So I picked out a 1975 BMW art car. Are you familiar with this at all?
I love that. I used to have a BMW.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, this was the first art car. So BMW's made 19 of them. And the first 4, let's see if I got the names right. Yeah, the first 4, the one I picked for you was painted by Alexander Calder. He's a sculptor, and I looked it up. He actually was just in the Phoenix Art Museum a year ago. Let's see. The other 3 were Frank Stella, Roy Lichtenstein, and Andy Warhol. They did the first 4. And they started out not as a PR tool. They were actually raced, but they turned into a PR tool. So BMW uses them now to kind of communicate what they're doing. And so their most recent ones, they've used to raise awareness of their alternative and renewable energy programs that they have at BMW. So I thought that would be a really cool one for you.
That is a genius selection, and I'm going to tell you why. Because my other dream car is a Tesla. I actually drive a Prius for work. That is my work car. And the reason why is that if you're a PR person, you're almost never in the office. You are out and about all the time. And having a car that is a hybrid or all-electric is awesome because you can be in the carpool lane.
All right.
Don't spend as much money on gas. And that's exactly why I have a renewable energy type car.
Well, I'm glad you have a company car. That's awesome. But if I still have all the money in the world, I'll still get you to BMW.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking us on your journey. What's the best way our listeners to learn more about you or your company?
Either LeighDow.com, which is LeighDow.com, or 48westagency.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your career journey today with us, Leigh.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.